Michael Carter's car rolled down the winding road leading to the Harrison estate, the late afternoon sun casting long, gold-tinged shadows across the perfectly manicured lawns. Even from a distance, the house looked intimidating, a sprawling mansion of white stone, flanked by tall hedges that seemed to whisper secrets. He parked near the iron gate, noticing the security cameras glinting in the sun, and took a deep breath. This was not just another case. Something about the Harrisons' air of perfection made him uneasy. Michael had seen plenty of wealthy families with skeletons in their closets, but there was something different here, a tension beneath the polished surface, the kind that could snap like a brittle branch. He adjusted his jacket, slid his notebook into the inside pocket, and approached the front door. It opened almost immediately. "Mr. Carter," said a woman with impeccable posture and a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Catherine Harrison. Her hand was cool when she shook his, but her gaze lingered just a second too long, steadying him as though she were measuring his worth. "Thank you for coming so promptly." Michael followed her through the grand foyer. The house smelled faintly of citrus and something metallic, like faint blood, though he quickly pushed the thought away. Every surface gleamed, every picture frame and ornament in perfect alignment, yet the subtle tension in the air made his instincts prickle. Richard Harrison entered shortly after, a tall man with a carefully cultivated charm. His handshake was firm, and his smile exuded confidence, but Michael caught a flicker of something darker in his eyes, something that spoke of control, of power, and perhaps fear. "I hear you're thorough," Richard said casually, though his tone suggested a warning more than a compliment. "We like thorough." Michael nodded. "I'm here to get a clear picture of your situation. I'll ask questions and I'll need access to records. Everything I find will be confidential." Richard's smile tightened, and Catherine gave him a brief, almost imperceptible glance. "Of course, we trust you to be discreet." The meeting began with the surface-level issues, missing invoices, minor financial discrepancies, nothing too alarming. Yet as Michael probed, he noticed subtle hesitations, passing glances, and the occasional stifled sigh. People rarely acted so cautiously over trivial matters. Something deeper was going on. Later that evening, Michael returned to the guest house where he was staying. He spread his notes across the desk, connecting dots that didn't quite add up. The Harrison children, teenagers who seemed polished and obedient, kept odd schedules. Neighbors spoke of strange comings and goings, and there were whispers of incidents that were never reported to the police. A knock on the door startled him. He wasn't expecting anyone. No one was outside, but a small envelope rested on the welcome mat. Inside, a single note. "Stop asking questions or you'll regret it." The handwriting was neat, almost elegant, but the threat was unmistakable. Michael's stomach tightened. This was no longer a simple case of financial oversight. Someone wanted him to stay away, and he had a feeling it wasn't just the family trying to protect their privacy. The next day, Michael returned to the mansion. Richard Harrison met him in the study, a room lined with leather-bound books and antique artifacts. Sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting shadows that seemed to stretch like fingers across the floor. "Do you believe everything you see?" Richard asked casually, though there was a tension in his jaw. Michael raised an eyebrow. "I believe in facts, not appearances." Richard smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Be careful, Mr. Carter. Facts can be dangerous." It was the first real warning Michael had received from the man. He filed it away, aware now that every word from Richard, every gesture from Catherine was loaded with subtext. Over the following days, Michael observed the family more closely. He noticed the way Catherine flinched when her husband's voice rose ever so slightly, the way the children exchanged knowing glances that didn't belong in a normal family dynamic, and the subtle security measures, hidden cameras, reinforced doors, a gate that wasn't listed on any public records. One evening, while reviewing financial statements in the mansion's library, Michael overheard hushed voices from the study. Through the slightly ajar door, he caught fragments. Someone who knows too much. Make sure they don't. The conversation ended abruptly, as if caught mid-thought. Michael's heart raced. The phrase repeated in his mind. Knows too much. The implication was chilling. Someone had paid the ultimate price for knowledge, and perhaps he was next. Determined to find out more, Michael spent the night combing through old property records and public documents. He discovered inconsistencies, transfers of money that made no sense, companies that existed only on paper, and people who had vanished without explanation. One name in particular caught his eye, and when he did a quick search, he felt a chill run down his spine. A man who had been reported missing years ago had been connected to the Harrisons. There was no record of the disappearance in the media, as if he had been erased entirely. Michael leaned back, rubbing his eyes. The estate, once a symbol of wealth and refinement, now felt like a labyrinth of secrets and danger. Every polished surface hid a shadow, every friendly smile carried a threat. He realized that he had stepped into a world where appearances were weaponized and knowledge could be deadly. Before leaving the library, he noticed a painting on the wall, a family portrait taken decades ago. Something about it seemed off. He studied it closely and then froze. Behind the patriarch in the painting, almost imperceptible, was a shadowy figure. It looked familiar, though he couldn't place it immediately. Michael took a photo with his phone, intending to compare it to other family photos later. That night, Michael sat in the guest house, reviewing his notes and photographs. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was being watched. Shadows moved outside the window, and distant headlights lingered on the driveway longer than necessary. Every instinct screamed that danger was closing in. He reviewed the mysterious note again. Whoever had sent it knew he was inside the mansion, knew his movements, and was confident enough to threaten him directly. Michael knew that continuing the investigation was no longer a matter of uncovering financial irregularities. It was about surviving long enough to uncover the truth. And yet, even as fear prickled at the edges of his mind, a stubborn determination took hold. He had always believed that the truth mattered no matter the cost. The Harrisons were hiding something significant, something worth killing for. Michael Carter didn't know what it was yet, but he was about to find out. The shadows outside thickened, the wind whispered through the trees, and the estate, perfect and untouchable by day, seemed alive with secrets by night. Somewhere inside, the family watched. Somewhere, danger was already closing in. And Michael knew, deep down, that he had just taken the first step into a world where knowledge could cost him his life. Michael Carter woke before dawn, the first rays of light cutting through the blinds of the guest house. Sleep had been shallow, fragmented by dreams of shadowy figures and whispers of warning. He poured himself coffee, his mind already racing through the details from the previous night. The more he examined the Harrison family, the more inconsistencies he found. The question that haunted him: how far were they willing to go to protect their secrets? Determined to dig deeper, Michael called Lisa, a trusted investigative journalist who had helped him on past cases. Her voice was steady, calm, but laced with curiosity and concern. "I've been following some leads on the Harrisons," he said, describing the envelope, the whispered threats, and the mysterious financial records. "Michael," Lisa said, her tone sharp now, "be careful. This family has been untouchable for decades. If someone knows too much, well, you saw the note." I know, Michael replied, but whatever they're hiding, it's bigger than missing invoices, something dark, and I'm going to find it. The first lead took him back to the mansion under the guise of following up on minor financial irregularities. Catherine Harrison greeted him at the door with her usual polished smile. "Morning, Mr. Carter. Breakfast?" Michael declined politely. He didn't want to linger in the rooms where the family could easily watch him. Instead, he focused on the more subtle signs of surveillance, the quiet hum of security cameras, the strategically placed mirrors, the way footsteps always seemed to echo just behind him. By mid-morning, he was in the study, poring over more account books and documents. That's when he noticed something alarming, a series of shell companies linked to offshore accounts, all funneling money in ways that made no logical sense. More troubling were the names associated with these accounts, people who had disappeared suddenly. Some reported missing, others simply vanished from public records. Michael's fingers trembled slightly as he made connections between these missing people and recent rumors he had overheard. One name in particular struck him cold: David Porter, an accountant who had once worked closely with the Harrisons. He remembered hearing neighbors whispering about David years ago, how he had left town abruptly and was never seen again. The documents suggested his disappearance was far from coincidental. Feeling the weight of the investigation, Michael decided to take a risk. That night, he returned to the mansion under the cover of darkness. Using the service entrance he had noticed the day before, he slipped inside with a flashlight hidden in his coat. Shadows stretched across the grand halls, and the familiar smell of citrus and polished wood now seemed ominous. In the study, Michael discovered a hidden panel behind a large bookcase. His pulse quickened as he carefully opened it. Inside was a safe. Heart pounding, he jotted down the combination he had observed from Catherine fumbling with it earlier that week, a small, careless mistake. He spun the dial, and with a soft click, the safe opened. Inside were photographs, documents, and audio recordings. Michael scanned quickly, his mind racing. The photographs were of people, former employees, neighbors, even distant relatives, each with a date and a cryptic note. Some simply said, "Gone," others, "Problem solved." His stomach turned. These were not accidents. These were executions of secrets, carefully planned and covered up. Among the files was a photograph that made him freeze. It was of David Porter, the accountant, and beside him, almost imperceptible in the shadows, a figure that looked disturbingly familiar. The same handwriting on the threatening envelope? A chill ran down Michael's spine. He realized the family had a method for dealing with those who knew too much, and it was not hypothetical. Michael stepped back from the safe, hearing footsteps echoing through the mansion. He ducked behind the velvet curtains just as Richard Harrison entered the room. Richard's gaze swept the study slowly, deliberately, as if he sensed the intrusion even without seeing it. "I do hope we're clear on boundaries," Richard said, his tone calm but sharp, each word weighted with menace. "Curiosity can be dangerous, Mr. Carter. Sometimes it's better not to ask questions." Michael held his breath, barely daring to move. Richard left as quietly as he had entered, but the warning lingered in the air like a storm cloud. He knew he had pushed too far, yet the proof he found in the safe was too important to ignore. That evening, he met Lisa at a quiet cafe, careful to avoid anyone following them. He laid out the photographs and documents before her, explaining what he had discovered. Lisa's eyes widened as she flipped through the files. This is huge," she whispered. "This isn't just financial misconduct. These people, these disappearances, this is murder, Michael. The Harrisons have been covering up crimes for years." "I know," Michael replied, feeling the weight of responsibility pressing down on him. "And now they know I've seen it. That's why the note. That's why I feel watched every step I take." Lisa reached across the table, gripping his hand firmly. "Then we need to be smart. We need to gather more evidence, but carefully. One wrong move, and She didn't finish the sentence. Both knew what it implied. The following week, Michael noticed a pattern. Every time he got close to uncovering something significant, subtle threats emerged. A car following him late at night, a shadow in his peripheral vision, his laptop occasionally acting as if someone else had accessed it. The family's reach was extensive, and they were ruthless. One night, returning from the library with a stack of records, Michael narrowly avoided a car that swerved at him in the dark. He slammed the brakes, heart racing as the car sped away, its headlights disappearing into the distance. This was no accident. It was a warning, a real one. The next day, he returned to the safe, determined to uncover the remaining secrets. Among the files, he found an envelope addressed to him, slipped in without his knowledge. Inside were photographs of his own apartment, taken through the windows, and a note that chilled him to the bone. "Some truths are deadly. Stop now." Michael stared at the photographs, feeling a cold certainty settle over him. The Harrison family didn't just protect secrets, they eliminated threats, and he had become a threat. But even as fear gnawed at his resolve, his determination hardened. He had uncovered proof that could bring the Harrisons down, and he wasn't about to turn back. The danger was real, the stakes higher than ever, and yet the thrill of the chase, the pursuit of truth, kept him moving forward. As Michael left the mansion that night, he noticed a figure standing across the street, watching. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, just stood there, silent and still, like a shadow etched in the darkness. Michael's hand went to his coat pocket, fingers brushing the flashlight, and he whispered to himself, "I have to see this through, no matter the cost." The Harrison estate loomed behind him, silent and unyielding. Inside, the family carried on with their flawless facade, unaware, or perhaps unconcerned, that the truth was slowly, dangerously catching up with them. And somewhere in the shadows, the game had only just begun. The night was unusually still. The kind of quiet that pressed against the ears and made every small sound feel amplified. Michael Carter sat in the dimly lit corner of a deserted diner, nursing a coffee that had gone cold hours ago. His eyes, sharp and restless, scanned the empty booths as if shadows themselves might move. He had followed the trail of evidence as far as it could go, and the truth was as dark as he had feared. The Harrison family didn't just protect their secrets, they eliminated threats, silently and efficiently. Lisa slid into the booth across from him, her expression tense. She placed a folder on the table, thick with photographs, documents, and copies of financial statements. "I spent the day combing through your files. This is worse than we thought." Michael nodded, his jaw tight. Every missing person, every suspicious transfer, it all leads back to them. And I have no doubt they've killed before. If they know what we have... He didn't finish the sentence. Lisa leaned forward, voice low. "Then we need a plan. We can't confront them directly. We can't risk exposing ourselves before we have absolute proof." Michael pushed the folder toward her. "I know, but we need something undeniable, something that ties the disappearances directly to them, something the police can't ignore." They spent hours going over the evidence. By the time they left the diner, the night was deep and heavy, the streets empty except for the occasional flicker of a streetlight. As they walked to their cars, Michael noticed a black SUV parked across the street. The windows were tinted, but the engine was running. "Followed again," Michael muttered. Lisa stiffened. "Do you think they know we've been meeting?" Michael didn't answer. He knew the answer already. Whoever was behind the Harrison family security network was watching them every step of the way. Every move they made, every call they made was likely monitored. The next day, Michael returned to the Harrison mansion under the guise of reviewing some minor discrepancies. Catherine greeted him with a smile that no longer seemed warm. Richard Harrison, impeccably dressed, extended his hand. "Mr. Carter," he said, eyes piercing, I trust you're feeling comfortable here." Michael nodded, though every instinct in his body screamed that danger lurked in every corner of the house. He followed Richard into the study, where sunlight streamed through tall windows, casting long shadows across the floor. Richard leaned against the desk, casual yet threatening. "You've been asking questions. Curiosity is admirable, but sometimes it comes at a cost." Michael met his gaze evenly. "And some truths need to be uncovered, no matter the cost." Richard smiled, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Ah, but there are truths that can destroy. Some knowledge is dangerous." Michael's hand brushed the inside pocket of his jacket, where he carried a small recorder he had hidden. He had captured conversations, evidence he hoped would expose the family. But as he considered activating it, he realized just how dangerous that would be. "Be careful, Mr. Carter," Richard said, stepping closer. "We're very good at protecting what's ours, and people who know too much disappear." The words hung in the air like a guillotine poised to fall. Michael felt a chill, the unmistakable warning of someone who had power beyond reason. That evening, Michael returned to his guest house. The streets were dark, empty, and unnervingly quiet. He had barely reached the door when he noticed a shadow detach itself from the corner of the street. He froze. Two figures emerged from the darkness, moving with deliberate precision. Michael's instincts screamed at him to run, but he had nowhere to hide. The figures circled him briefly, and he recognized the pattern immediately. They were professionals, trained, precise. Before he could react, they struck. A sharp blow to the back of his head, a blinding pain, and the world went black. When he woke, he was in a dim, windowless room. His hands were bound, and the air smelled faintly of disinfectant and old wood. Across from him stood Richard Harrison, calm, collected, the picture of controlled menace. "I warned you," Richard said softly, his voice cold and deliberate. "People who know too much often pay the ultimate price." Michael struggled against his restraints, but it was useless. "You can't get away with this," he rasped. Richard's smile widened. "We already have, and people like you, they make mistakes." Hours passed as Richard questioned him, subtly, psychologically, probing Michael's intentions, his motivations, even his loyalty to Lisa. Every word, every gesture was designed to intimidate, to break him without physical harm. The psychological manipulation was nearly suffocating. Michael realized that confrontation with the Harrisons was more than physical, it was a battle of wills. Every escape route he had imagined was neutralized, every ally compromised. The house was a fortress, the family's reach far beyond what he had imagined. Finally, Richard stood and nodded to one of the shadows in the corner. "Ensure he understands the consequences of disobedience." The next moments blurred, a struggle, a flash of movement, a sharp pain in his side. Michael fought as best as he could, but the professionals were relentless. His vision blurred, his strength waned, and the realization hit him like ice. Knowledge in this house was more dangerous than death itself. Later, Michael found himself staged in a robbery gone wrong scenario. The scene was carefully orchestrated, doors left unlocked, valuables scattered, a staged struggle. It was meant to be convincing to anyone investigating. The family's meticulous planning ensured that the truth would remain buried. The next morning, news of Michael's death spread quickly. Local authorities described it as a tragic robbery, a shocking accident that had claimed the life of a promising investigator. Friends and colleagues were stunned, mourning the loss of a man who had devoted himself to uncovering the truth. But Lisa, however, refused to accept the official narrative. She reviewed Michael's notes, recordings, and photographs with a growing sense of dread. The signs were unmistakable. The Harrison family had eliminated him. And yet, his work had left breadcrumbs, enough for her to pick up where he had left off. She clenched her fists around the folder, determination burning in her eyes. "They think they've won," she whispered to herself, "but they haven't seen the last of this." Meanwhile, the Harrison mansion resumed its facade of perfection. The family laughed over breakfast, their interactions polished, charming, and calm. Yet beneath the surface, tension simmered. Michael had come too close, and while he was gone, the threat of exposure lingered like smoke waiting for the right gust of wind to ignite. The shadow of Michael's investigation stretched across the town, unseen but deadly. The audience was left on edge, knowing that while the man who knew too much was gone, the battle against the family's secrets was far from over. The game had reached its climax, but the consequences of truth, danger, betrayal, and death had only just begun. The first snow of winter dusted the town in a brittle, white silence. Lisa sat alone in Michael's office, a single desk lamp illuminating the chaos around her, files, photographs, and recordings strewn across every surface. The weight of the past weeks pressed down on her, heavier than she had ever imagined. Michael Carter was gone, eliminated in a calculated act of violence by a family that wielded power like a weapon. Yet, in his absence, he had left her breadcrumbs. Notes meticulously cataloged, photographs labeled with dates and names, recordings of hushed conversations, and the hidden files he had recovered from the Harrison mansion. It was enough, just enough to bring down a family that had lived for decades behind a facade of perfection. Lisa's hands trembled as she sifted through the documents. There were financial statements implicating the Harrisons in embezzlement, photographs of people who had disappeared, and personal notes that indicated blackmail and coercion. But the most chilling evidence were the audio recordings Michael had secretly captured, Richard Harrison's own voice discussing threats, silencing problems, and manipulating those around him. Her determination hardened. "They think they've won," she whispered to herself, "but they haven't." Over the following days, Lisa worked tirelessly piecing together the puzzle. She cross-referenced bank accounts, traced offshore transfers, and identified patterns linking the family to multiple disappearances. Each lead brought her closer to the truth and closer to danger. The first threat came quietly. A note slipped under her apartment door read, "Leave it alone, or you'll end up like him." Her pulse raced, but she refused to be intimidated. She had been warned, she had been threatened, and she had seen what the family was capable of, but fear could not stop her. Using Michael's contacts, she secretly met with whistleblowers, former employees, distant relatives, and one nervous neighbor who had witnessed events long hidden from the public eye. Their testimonies, combined with Michael's files, formed a web of evidence too extensive to ignore. The Harrison family's carefully constructed image of perfection was beginning to crack. Lisa knew, however, that direct confrontation was impossible. The Harrisons had influence in local law enforcement, media outlets, and even political connections. Any public accusation without irrefutable evidence would be dismissed, or worse, used against her. She had to be meticulous. She had to be clever. Her breakthrough came when she discovered a pattern in the family's financial transactions, large sums funneled through shell companies traced to a charity that supposedly supported underprivileged children. The irony was bitter. The same charity had served as a cover for years, masking embezzlement and laundering money from illicit activities. With this new lead, Lisa contacted a national investigative outlet, someone beyond the family's reach. Together, they prepared a detailed exposé, complete with Michael's evidence, testimonies from whistleblowers, and an airtight chain linking the Harrisons to crimes that had been hidden for decades. Meanwhile, the Harrisons began to notice cracks in their armor. Catherine's smile faltered at the dinner table. Richard's eyes, usually so controlled, flickered with unease. The children, once obedient and composed, whispered among themselves, sensing the tension. But outwardly, they maintained their facade. The family knew that a public scandal would destroy everything they had built, but they underestimated Lisa's determination. The exposé was published on a Friday morning. Headlines screamed, "The dark secrets of the Harrisons, murder, corruption, and lies uncovered." The town erupted in shock. Authorities, previously hesitant to investigate, were forced to act. Federal agencies became involved, driven by the undeniable weight of evidence. Richard Harrison was interrogated under intense scrutiny. His calm, polished demeanor cracked under the pressure. Catherine Harrison's carefully rehearsed composure faltered. The children were questioned, revealing details that had long been hidden from the public eye. The evidence from Michael's files, coupled with Lisa's relentless investigation, left the family with no room to maneuver. The trials were long and bitter. The media coverage was relentless. The Harrisons, once untouchable, faced the full force of justice. Embezzlement charges, charges of obstruction of justice, and multiple counts of conspiracy to commit murder emerged. Though Michael could not see the outcome, his work had paved the way for accountability. Lisa watched the proceedings with a mix of satisfaction and sorrow. Justice had been served, but at a terrible cost. Michael's life had been stolen by a family willing to kill to protect their secrets. Yet his legacy endured. Without his courage, the truth might never have come to light. One evening, after the courtroom had emptied and the press had filed their stories, Lisa returned to Michael's office. She sat at his desk, her fingers brushing the scattered photographs and notes. In the center lay the photograph Michael had taken of the Harrison family portrait, decades old yet hauntingly relevant. Behind the patriarch in the photo, almost hidden in the shadows, was the figure of a man whose life had been erased. Michael was right. Knowledge had a price. Lisa closed the folder and leaned back, staring at the ceiling. The fight had been won, but the war for truth was never truly over. There were families like the Harrisons everywhere, hiding behind wealth, influence, and charm. She had survived, and now she had a responsibility to continue shining a light on the darkness. Outside, the snow fell silently, covering the town with a blanket of deceptive serenity. Inside, Lisa reflected on the danger, the betrayal, and the courage it took to pursue the truth. She whispered a quiet vow to Michael, the man who had paid the ultimate price. "I'll finish what you started. They won't hide forever." The story of the Harrisons became a cautionary tale, a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that power can corrupt absolutely, and that knowledge, though deadly, is worth the risk. Michael Carter's name was remembered not as a victim, but as a hero whose determination had unraveled a family's empire of lies. And somewhere in the shadows of the town, the legacy of his investigation lived on. The Harrisons were broken, exposed, and held accountable, but the echoes of their secrets would linger, a warning to anyone who dared to dig too deep. Justice had been served, but at a cost that could never be forgotten. Michael knew too much, and he had paid the ultimate price, but through his courage, the darkness had been brought into the light. Lisa closed the final file, the weight of the story heavy on her shoulders. She knew this was only one battle in a world full of hidden truths, but for the first time, she felt that courage and determination could prevail, even against the most dangerous families, and even when the cost was life itself. The snow continued to fall, silent and relentless, as the town slowly recovered from the shock. Inside Michael's office, Lisa whispered once more, a promise and a tribute. "You gave your life for the truth, Michael. I won't let it die with you." The Harrison family's empire had crumbled, their secrets laid bare, and the shadow of Michael Carter's courage had changed everything. Yet the story lingered, a chilling reminder that in a world of power and deception, knowing too much can indeed cost you your life, but sometimes it is the only way to save others.